accept Ms. Topham. We'll get started and hopefully she joins us here soon.
There
Unless
she
we
is.
heard differently. Oh, I see that she just logged in. Why don't we just give her a minute? I'll get going on the remote meeting script. Good evening. Where did I put the script? My name is Arthur Gasparo, Nantucket Airport Commission Chairman. Welcome to the December 13th, 2022 Airport Commission meeting. This open meeting is being conducted remotely pursuant to the Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. We're convening the meeting by video conference via Zoom app as posted on the town's website. The meeting will be aired at a later time on the Town of Nantucket YouTube channel. Please note this meeting is being recorded. All attendees are participating by video conference. Please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and not to screen share your computer. Any supporting materials that have been provided the body available on the town's website. We'll go down and introduce each speaker on the agenda and then go down the line of members, inviting all to make any comment, questions, or motion. Please remember that all conversation should go through the chair, and each vote in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. And with that, we'll move on to the published agenda. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns on the agenda as published?
No.
Okay, hearing none, we'll consider that adopted by unanimous consent. We have the minutes of the November 18th meeting for review and adoption. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns on those minutes? Hearing none, we'll consider those adopted by unanimous consent. We have to ratify the warrants of November 16th and December 7th. Are there any questions or a motion to ratify those two warrants?
I'll make that motion.
And is there a second?
Second.
Second.
The motion's been made and seconded. Ms. Topham, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer,
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin,
Aye.
and Mr. Marks.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Are there any public comment for items that are not otherwise on the agenda? Hearing none, we'll move on to pending leases and contracts set forth on Exhibit 1. Mr. Rafter.
Thank you. The first is a letter of agreement with Anderson and Krieger for legal services for the year 2023 general matters. Next is a contract with MHQ. This was part of a handout that came out today. We just got the documents in today. And that's for $56,316.75 for the purchase of a new Ford F-250 to replace our operations vehicle, Airport 11. That's coming out of the capital budget. And we have a contract amendment with Zenergy Building Technologies. It's an extension of the date, their expiration date, so that we can pay them for the project that they're just finishing up now.
Thank you, Mr. Rafter. Are there any questions regarding the letter of agreement, contract or contract amendment? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
So
Make the
moved.
motion.
Motion's been made and I think seconded. Ms. Topham, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer,
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin.
Aye.
Mr. Marks.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. And with that, we will move on to next item on the agenda, which is terminal optimization and legislation presentation. Mr. Rafter.
Yes, I've asked Rich Lasden from McFarland Johnson to give us a brief presentation. The chair and vice chair took advantage of a tour on what this project consists of. We wanted to brief the entire commission on an overview of the project as well as potential funding opportunities so that everyone's aware of how we're proceeding with this. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Rich.
Thank you, Tom. Can someone share the screen with the presentation?
Brianna, do you have it or?
It's in the agenda. Or I can share it. Why don't I share my screen if I can do that?
Yeah, I don't
Would it
have
be
it.
easier if you were able to do it yourself, Mr. Lasden, so
Yep.
that you can scroll as you see fit?
Yeah,
Thanks.
does everybody see my screen?
Yep,
Okay, thank you, everyone. So we have been talking about the terminal and the existing conditions of the terminal, the sort of the passenger experience for a while. And there's been some discussion back and forth on how do we improve that and what do those improvements look like? So back, I guess about 6 months ago, we convened a charrette with Fenwick McCready to sort of sit down with selected staff members. I believe it was the chair, the vice chair, and the airport staff to sort of talk about what are the challenges at the airport and how could we possibly improve those challenges. And we looked at a variety of things, from replacing the entire terminal to doing some interior modifications. So the screen in front of you is the existing terminal as it is today. Can everybody see my cursor? So the terminal is sort of broken up into two parts. This piece over here is the non-secure Cape Air type flights. And this piece over here is the conventional secure departure lounge for JetBlue, American, Delta, et cetera, those kind of airlines. And the interior portion is ticket space, bag check, sort of back of the house space, and all the other functional areas of the airport. So if we looked at the existing footprint of the airport, this is the area that we have to look at to make improvements or to make changes to. We also sort of, to use the term, thought outside the box a little bit, that we have a basement under this portion of the building. And is there anything we can do with the basement space? So some of the deficiencies that were brought up, and this was a collaboration with the airport staff and others to sort of think about what is the deficiencies of the current building. So insufficient secure hold room space, lack of post-security concessions. If everybody knows, once you go through security into the hold room, there's a couple of vending machines and there's a couple of restrooms. And in the summer in the tent, there has been a vendor out there. I don't know how successful that's been or not, but there has been a vendor out in the tent occasionally. Insufficient passengers queuing space. The next screen sort of shows a shot over the summer. Insufficient outbound baggage screening space. The ticket counter, the conveyor at the ticket counter stops right here. So anybody that works at these counters has to hand carry the luggage after it's passed through the counter to the conveyor belt. And then passenger flow conflicts. So those are the sort of the big picture deficiencies that we looked at and tried to develop some solutions for. So again, this is the picture of last summer. The queue line was pretty long. I think Noah might have taken this photo. So that's some of the challenges that we're hoping to sort of fix if we can. So then we looked at areas of opportunity and where could we put expansions if we wanted to expand, or what could we do? And we looked at some areas on the land side, on the air side. Can we divide the terminal up into a secure side and a non-secure side and make it essentially two terminals? Or what do we do? So we looked at a whole series of opportunities to make improvements. So we came up with essentially three options within the walls, which is how do we repurpose the existing space and possibly a small expansion? Do we make two different airports with a passenger processing facility? In other words, move the curb frontage of the airport away from the terminal so that the terminal just becomes secure hold room and airline and baggage processing. So the counter where you would check your bag or collect your ticket would be a brand new building built out in the parking lot. And then the third one would be this twin terminals, make a whole separate experience for people flying long distance on secured flights versus people staying local on the non-secure Cape Air type flights. Those are the three big picture concepts that were discussed. So in discussions with the chair and the vice chair, and looking at big picture costs, the within the walls seem to be the most readily available solution that could be most quickly designed and constructed. We also had a meeting with both the TSA and one of the airlines to sort of get their feel on, is this an acceptable solution? The airlines were all about it. They thought it was a great idea and were supportive. The one airline was supportive of it. The TSA had a little more challenges in that they're the TSA. So if you touch their space, they want to bring it up to today's standards and completely sort of rebuild their space. So we have to sort of get a little further into what the TSA wants before we sort of figure that part out. Cost and funding. So this is sort of where the rubber hits the road, I guess. Based on big picture estimates, this looks like a $10 to $15 million program. And so the next thing we looked at was, how do we pay for it? What are the opportunities to help us pay for this? There is the PFC program, which is the traditional model to fund terminals. I guess, unfortunately, your PFCs are obligated at least to 2029. So that wouldn't be an opportunity for PFC funding. MassDOT and state bonding. So MassDOT, we've been talking to MassDOT for years to try to get them to at least fund the design portion of this project. And to date, we have been unsuccessful in getting them to come to the table to provide funding for, at least for design. The bonding piece would be similar to for the rest of Massachusetts, the General Aviation Administration Building Program, or in the case of New Bedford has a bond, and they were successful in finally getting that bond. I keep confusing authorized versus appropriated, but they finally got the money. The bond has been out there for, I think, 10 or more years, and they finally got the money obligated this year to use it. So there would be some work on getting the state to back this, but we have a pretty good argument in that we are a fairly busy commercial service airport that does have growing pains. And then there's the traditional AIP program. The AIP program and the PFC program are similar in how they determine eligibility of buildings. So eligibility of buildings means, what will the FAA fund based on the functionality of the space? So they will fund public spaces specifically geared towards an airport. So they'll do portions of back house space. So they'll do a portion of the heating system, they will do a portion of the electrical system, they'll do portions of other stuff. But as you can see here, your existing terminal was 59% eligible. So in the big picture, that means if you had a $10 million building, under that scenario, 5.9 of it would be eligible for FAA funding, and the rest would be local funding. What does that local funding look like? That's another discussion we have to have. And then in addition to that, that 59% would still be subject to their 90-10 match. And then the last piece is the new CARES Act funding programs that came out from the federal government. And there are two types of federal funding opportunities through the CARES Act. The first is the AIG grant, which is Airport Infrastructure Grant. And essentially the dollar value of that mimics your AIP entitlement money. So right now, I believe you get somewhere around $1.5 million a year in AIP entitlement money. This would mimic that amount. And then as similar to the AIP program, it's based on enplanements. Your enplanements have been fairly stable, so your money presumably would be fairly stable at about $1.5 million a year. The other portion of that is the ATP, or the Airport Terminal Program. And that is a completely competitive process. So we can go through it a little bit. It's available for terminals and towers. There is only $100 million a year available for the entire United States for the next 5 years for non-primary and non-hub airports, which is the category that you classify as. It's subject to, as I said, a non-federal share. In this case, they're doing 95%. So you would have to come up with 5%. Again, this is all based on eligible numbers. And we did some research so you can sort of get a feel for what does this grant look like. So the average grant for your category of airports was only $3.6 million for the airports across the United States. And then of the 12 airports, 10 of the 12 airports in the New England and Eastern region were essentially shovel ready. So the design was complete and they were ready to go out to bid. So those airports funded the design up front or somehow figured out how to pay for the design up front and then took the chance that they were going to get money from the federal government, understanding that the average grant was $3.6 million. So funding is going to be a challenge.
But Rich, thank you. And I apologize. We lost internet here, so I missed some of the presentation, but I think I understand what it is.
Yep.
And as Rich said, the funding is going to be a bit of a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. With this bill money, we do have the opportunity for a new funding source in the terminal area. Rich has been very successful in getting us very high eligibility on the South Apron project. In fact, the FAA believes that they're going to be able to get us 16 million discretionary funds for that. But we're going to have to apply our bill AIG funds to it as well. So it's part of the big picture. You look at the terminal project and the South Apron job. I just wanted the commission to be aware of, one, what the overview of this project was, as well as the potential funding sources, pitfalls, whatever. But we want to be able to take advantage of the bill program as well. So unless there's a major objection to proceeding with this project, we're going to proceed with the design of it so that we can try to take advantage of the bill grant. You have any questions for Rich or me? Or
No, thank you, Rich. That all sounds like a good approach to me. Commissioners, any input or thoughts, comments?
We're just talking about designing something within the walls that we have already. Is that correct?
So I will go, if everybody started looking at my screen, I will go back and sort of find the. So the within the walls concept is essentially, it's twofold, as you can see here. It's how do we repurpose the existing space? One of the biggest shortcomings is there's not enough secure hold room space. So we looked at the existing terminal and said, okay, what is a better purpose for the existing space you have? And right now, this corner of the airport is bag screening. And it's, if you look at the airport, it's on the front corner of the airport with a beautiful view of the runway and the airfield, and it's traditional back office space. And then the rest of the curb frontage, if you might call it, is back offices for the airlines. So in looking at this, and again, as I said before, we sort of thought outside the box and said, what are we doing in that big basement? So in this particular option, and again, we've just taught about this big picture, we said, okay, maybe we can move the bag screening over to here, where the airport office space is, and there's a couple of ramp employee break rooms and locker rooms and bathrooms here. Move the bag screening here so that the area where the bag screening is today can be new hold room space, and put the airline back office space down in the basement. And then expand or redesign the curb frontage on the street, ticketing, meter greeter areas, baggage, sort of the public side of the counter space. Infill this corner where there's currently a couple of benches and a little bit of grass sort of between the tower and the arrivals doorway. Fill in that grass with some new building. Tony,
Does that
you're on
answer
mute.
your-
It does. That's fine. Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else? Okay, so the next step or time we'll hear back from you again, Rich.
So the next step is, I guess, is the committee authorizing us to prepare a scope and fee for design.
Yeah, so we'll ask Rich to do that. We'll negotiate it with them and then bring it back to the commission for approval for a task order to begin the design work.
Sounds good. Okay, thank you, Rich.
All right, I'll stop sharing. Yes?
Yes, please.
Thanks, Rich.
And then we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the South Apron Operating Plan. Mr. Carberg and I believe Mr. Harmon.
Hi, Preston Harriman, Compliance Manager. Thank you, Chairman and Commission. Tom and Noah had asked me to present the operational plan that we've got going for the ramp expansion. Tom had mentioned we've had a couple of issues with internet. I've been booted off twice. I'm not sure if anybody else here at the airport has, but if for some reason I get booted off again, I'll try to send this to Boyan or something, see if we can jump back on. So, but with that, I'll start sharing my screen. Everybody see that okay?
Looks good.
Awesome. So I know that Tom has probably already shown these pictures a million times, but I wanted to throw them up again because I do feel like it is very helpful to kind of understand where we stand currently and what we're, looking to do as far as this ramp extension and providing a little more operational safety out there for basically everybody involved, line service, pilots, passengers, anybody flying in and out of here. The top right photo is taken from the tower, and I don't know if I did that or somebody had sent it to me, but I thought it was kind of interesting. If you look on the ramp, all those planes that are actually facing us that are crammed in there, it was a busy, I think maybe a Saturday or Sunday. The ramp is just rocking, and every plane in there is going to have to be towed out somehow, some way. The bottom left photo, of course, is our run-up area with, I believe there's a G6 in there, a couple Global Expresses, a 172 getting ready to take off. And then if you look on the runway itself, there's another Gulfstream ready to take off. The top left picture shows when I was working the ramp a couple of years ago, my idea of trying to stack airplanes in and try to utilize the ramp, a little bit in a different way than what we've actually been used to. It worked to an extent. Then you worry about pilots randomly showing up and saying, hey, we got to leave in 5 minutes. And now you're scrambling around trying to get the tug out there and the plane into a position for them to prepare it for taxi and takeoff. The current plan is shown here with I believe it's 9 additional spots, with the first one being a larger spot to accommodate an air carrier aircraft. And that spot would be a power in, power out type of situation. We would also utilize that probably as a quick turn spot for a in and out real quick turn and burn type of situation. The noise berm on there, or whatever we're calling it now, Rich might correct me on that, is shown in there as well. We can look at that in a little more detail in a couple of more slides. This also shows the addition of an additional taxiway connector coming off of Echo, and then a reconfiguration of taxiway Juliet coming onto the southwest ramp. So we've identified, we believe is a good option for how we intend to use this ramp. Basically identifying it as hot, warm, and cold. The hot operations would be fully unrestricted to basically accommodate our busiest peak times. So holiday weekends, festivals, any type of VIP movements. The warm operations, kind of almost I envision that as filling in the gaps from Memorial Day to say Labor Day on your normal, weekday and or just a normal weekend where we don't have a festival going on or it's a holiday type of situation. And then of course our cold operations, which we're gonna include our shoulder seasons and then dead of winter protocol. The picture there, I've got everybody, I can move that. So the picture is a Gulfstream kind of overlapping our single engine row. I don't know what the situation was here, but it is a good visual cue on how the ramp looks sometimes. And you go out there and you see in this multi-million-dollar aircraft sitting on the ramp, very close to a small single engine airplane, your heart drops real quickly. So there's another good reason why we really want this ramp and need it for a safety aspect. I was flipping my notes here. So as far as the hot operations, we would use the ramp basically to the full extent possible. It would be a power in, tow out situation. The way that it's currently configured with the noise berm or the stockpile of material, the markings that I envision how they're going to be laid out, the parking configuration itself would be a power in, and then we would have to tow the airplanes out into position for taxi and takeoff. We would manage the 15 minutes or manage and enforce the 15-minute APU limit, just like we would do anywhere else here on the ramp. Again, that spot number one would be a quick turn, power in, power out situation. Again, the hot ops would be for holidays, festivals, VIP movements, or any type of other security operations. We would stage a tow operator and a tow vehicle in that area to accommodate the peak traffic times. And then, of course, I think everybody probably understands that the peak traffic times are going to be, Friday, mid to late afternoons. Saturdays have been really big as far as turnover goes with, short-term rentals. And then Sundays as well is historically busy. If it's a holiday weekend, we include basically Sunday or Monday becomes Sunday, and then our Tuesday morning becomes our Monday morning. I wanted to take a moment just to kind of list out what we've got going on usually for our busiest times. So we're looking at Film Fest, Fagawi, 4th of July, Comedy Fest, Boston Pops, Labor Day weekend, Columbus Day weekend, and Christmas stroll. Columbus Day weekend has been growing, I think, the last couple of years. Just a lot of weddings are now happening in the fall. And then as far as Christmas stroll goes, our VIP movement for Thanksgiving has last couple of years has pushed, I believe, a lot of our travelers to Christmas stroll. So that's kind of, in my eyes, kind of have an upward tick as far as traffic for us. So going into the warm operations, I envision this as being a basically an overflow type of operation where it's in season from Memorial Day to Labor Day, where it's not quite a hot operation, but we're able to tow airplanes off of the main ramp into the ramp extension, and being able to monitor them a little bit closely as far as who is coming, who is going, APUs, GPUs, things of that nature. So we would be able to enforce, I believe, the APU restrictions and engine startups, and we're shutting down where we're towing them to. We'd have a little more flexibility in the warm operations. We would have the tow vehicle and the tow operator basically available as needed. I do believe a warm ops is probably going to be the highest level of coordination between operations and the FBO. With that being said, I believe we could utilize our X1 FBO software system a little bit better than kind of what we're doing now. I looked at the system few days ago, and it does have options for requesting parking, current parking position, pulling online times, and then kind of where they're actually located at. So in the next couple of slides, we'll talk about some possible ramp markings that we could use to identify where the planes are currently parked, or where they're going to be parked, where they're going to be pulled to, what time. And it would just take a little bit of coordination between ops, line service, and the FBO to make this click seamlessly during the warm operations. And I believe X1 has the capability to provide the information to everybody that needs it, pending that, the data entry is actually getting inputted into it. So cold operations, we're looking at basically static or long-term parking only. No APU operations. We would allow GPU operations. All our planes would be towed in and out. And I do envision that we could probably close the area from after stroll to, what did I say, May 15th. So that would, somebody had asked me, is that going to be okay for Daffodil Weekend? Well, I do think we are busy for Daffy. I don't know if we're that busy that we would need to open up that section of the ramp to accommodate Daffodil Festival, but I think we'd want to definitely have it open, ready to roll for a hot operation or a warm operation for Memorial Day weekend. So we have hot ops, we've got warm, we've got cold. I was kind of going back, I looked at my drone photo that I had taken here, and it's a combination of everything. It's like all the above. We've got cold, we've got hot, and we've got warm all in one location. So I do think that once we get the ramp established, after maybe a year of operation, we have a better understanding on how it would actually work in our favor, how we can reduce the noise and become, be a good neighbor and operate this ramp extension, just very smooth. I think the combination of it could be cold/warm, could be cold and hot on given days. And again, it's all going to kind of depend on the weekend, the weather, and exactly kind of what is happening. The picture of the Global Express, that's in the run-up area, very close to the taxiway. And of course, it's hooked up to the tug and we're getting that sucker out of there as quick as possible. But that's what we run into during the summertime. We also have on here that, this is going to provide safer aircraft movements and greatly reduce the need to, say, park in the run-up area or park on a closed runway. We gain the ability to spread things out a little bit to provide a little more wing clearances to help reduce the ramp rash or any aircraft incidents that may occur. And of course, that was going to reduce our costs of insurance and incident claims. So here's a quick shot of the noise berm itself. We're looking at 1,000 feet long, and I don't know, Rich, you could correct me if I'm wrong here, if that's going to be kind of phased, if it's all going to be built one time, or if it's going to be phased in a few hundred feet at a time.
So yes to both. So the idea is to build as the FAA now indicated, the surplus material disposal area. And the idea is to use this to dispose of our PFAS waste that we can't get rid of. So we would build the berm, as we call it, out of PFAS wasted soil and build it as we generate the soil.
Thank you. So we are looking at 1,000 feet long, 110 feet wide, and about 16.5 feet tall. We would also utilize probably the same signage that we would have on the existing ramp with 15-minute APU restrictions and limitations. We would have operations log any interactions that they do have with the pilots, whether it's a first offense, second offense, if they complied, with the APU restriction. We would apply all that just like we're doing now to that extension. And then that would be logged either in our VFG system or possibly switching over to X1. And then the possible addition of the noise station, we're looking at a $30,000 noise station, which would include, I believe, the equipment and software, and then there would be an ongoing maintenance fee after that. I don't know a whole lot about that, so I didn't know if Noah wanted to chime in on any of the noise monitoring station. It's not my expert tease at all.
I'm available for questions.
Okay. So as far as ramp markings or pushback and tow operations, this quick shot, I think I probably pulled it out of the advisory circular, shows an airplane coming from the taxiway up onto the ramp area or the terminal ramp. I do believe that we wanted to utilize some ramp control markings, or on the next slide, we've got surface painted gate identification markings and then some lead-in lines. I know that this is not how our setup is going to be, but I do feel like it's a good visual reference on how we could possibly have our sign and marking plan look. And I feel like utilizing ramp markings or ramp control markings and gate identifications, we could have a better communication between the pilot operations and the FBO that, hey, I'm in spot number 5. I need this, ice, coffee, paper. Passengers are going to be here in 15 minutes. So might as well get a tow vehicle ready and out there ready to go type of situation. So I think markings are definitely going to be key. The signs, Skylar, our new ops superintendent, has brought up the surface painted Unicom signs, which I think are going to be huge help. Just so everybody knows what frequency to call for services and or parking instructions. And I also think that's gonna come and play when we start looking at the actual signs and the lights, when we start looking at our sign and marking plan that needs to be reviewed and approved by the FAA. This photo here shows a ton of lights, taxiway, center line lights, edge lights, runway lights, you name it. So there's many options out there that we could utilize. We're not quite there yet as far as design on the lighting aspect. I had put on here the low profile LED apron lighting. We had a meeting the other day with Rich. He knows more about lighting than I do. There's a ton of different options out there. There's low, there's tall. You can put shields on them to you know, so the light is shining where you want. So I think we've got some options there where we want to go. And of course, I think we want to make sure that the lights that are over there are hooked up to our airport lighting and control system, which is in our new ballroom. The security cameras, addition of security cameras, just so we can basically see what's going on down there from our operation watch room. We want to be able to have eyes on the ramp for sure. Being able to see the congestion that it could possibly be there, or a tail number that's, you know, say pushed out and now has a weather delay. We'd be able to get a better plan of where they need to go, what spots are open, and then possibly using or putting up an additional camera that faces the existing ramp, because there are a couple blind spots out there that would be extremely helpful if we could see. I envision this being possibly hooked up to our Vigilon system, which was put in a few years ago, I believe, possibly state funded. I spoke with a gentleman at the MAMA conference, and I think it was October when we went out there. And then they're actually going to come out and do a site visit in January to take a look at our system, possibly do some upgrades for us, adjust the cameras as needed, and then we could possibly talk to him about some additional cameras on the extension. Whether we like it or not, the future of aviation is coming very soon. Do I feel like we're going to see some of these? Yes, I do. Do I think we're going to see a ton of them? No, probably not. I don't think the owner of the G5 is going to jump in one of these anytime soon. But I do believe we want to put it on our radar, just on, you know, for any project that we've got going on in the near future, that we want to start talking about how we're going to get, you know, power to the infrastructure for these new upcoming eVTOL aircraft. So hopefully we get a little chuckle out of this one. I wanted to throw up the plan implementation. Everybody hopefully has seen the movie Airplane. I believe this is from the air traffic control tower, where everybody's stressed out and sweating like crazy. But this made me think of the watch room on a Sunday or a Saturday, and where multitasking is at its best. The stress level up in that watch room is insane right now. Anybody that wants to stop by, you know, now's not a good time, but you know, in the next season, swing by and we can go over and take a walk around. You can understand how the guys and the gals up there are running the show and multitasking with the best air traffic controllers. It's basically, as Tom always says, we've turned it into a ramp control. It's pretty impressive to watch. But anyway, the operations personnel are going to be the ones that are responsible for determining what level of operation will be utilized either for that day or possibly for the weekend, whether it's hot, warm, or cold. Doing shift briefings with everybody, I envision a status board possibly in the watchroom and the FBO showing what type of operation that we're running under. And of course, training on full-time and seasonal employees on how we're gonna be running the new show. Some other special considerations, basically, if a lot of the winds out here, we get some really cranking southeast winds, and these planes don't like the wind up the tail cone, so we get a lot of pilots requesting to be turned into the wind. With that being said, we do our best to try to put them in areas where they're not, having jet blast going across the road, or they're closer to a taxiway and doing a quick, immediate engine startup and taxi. So they're basically kicking the tires and lighting the fires and getting out of here. Med flight, we would be able to have a more steady spot, more consistent spot for med flight. The last couple of summers, they've been kind of bouncing all over the ramp, which they don't like. With us being able to move some planes a little further down, we could designate them a spot closest to the fire station. Weather delays are always a problem. Ground stops going into the New York area are very unpredictable. Those are going to be hard to manage. And again, I think, being able to have this extension of the ramp would possibly allow us to maybe utilize the run-up area for some short-term, aircraft that are just waiting for, their clearance for takeoff. So that would open up that window a little bit for us. There are talks of possibly utilizing the berm for some possible GSC storage. We're kind of in the beginning stages of that right now, utilizing kind of like a bunker type of style storage for some equipment. And I already mentioned training is going to be vital. And then I envision this plan being, at least for the first year, a living document where we're going to be changing and figuring out what our best practices are. I believe that is it. If you guys have any questions, I do my best to answer them.
I have a question on, I've forgotten that question. Do you foresee more staff that you're gonna need and train? I mean, you're talking about the training. You're gonna need more staff?
Yeah, we're definitely going to need some more staffing to get out onto the ramp and manage that section for sure. I envision it being tied up in like a tow operator type of situation. We might be able to say get a couple more seasonal employees that would relieve possibly a full-time person that we could send down there for that hot operation. But yes, it's going to take personnel to run it.
Thank you. Ms. Topham, do you have any other questions?
No, thank you.
Commissioners, any other comments or questions?
Yeah, I have a question. So down on that, in the apron area, right, there's the grass strip there you have.
Oh, you want me to bring that back up?
You don't mind, Preston, please?
Let's see. You wanted to see the ramp itself?
Yeah, that 11. Yeah. So is it possible to just do away with the grass strip, turn onto there by using taxiway Echo, and then the pilots could then pull forward and not have to be towed and turn and then come back around onto the taxiway? And then
You're talking about the island here?
yeah, put the planes there with the tails facing the taxiway and That way you don't have, they can park themselves essentially and then taxi out of there, same way.
Rich might know better than me, but I think you start running into possible obstacle-free areas for the taxiway.
You do, and there's also a series of drainage features in that grass.
Already, Rich, or are you gonna add them?
No, we'll be putting drainage in there for the new ramp.
Well, couldn't that be moved like to the other side?
It could be, but
To not have to tow every single plane out of there, that's why I thought of it, that was my one question, if that's a possibility. And the berm, is that the best way to mitigate the sound? I'm just curious, is that?
So there was a lot of discussions about noise mitigation and what does that look like? There's walls that can be built, there's other things that can be done. The berm was just a discussion that we had 8-9 months ago about we need to build, we're looking to build a wall to get rid of to mitigate the noise. And then we had all this soil from PFAS that we can't ever get rid of. So we just sort of married the two together and said, we can't ever get rid of the soil. Let's just make a noise berm out of that soil.
So I guess the thing that kind of raised the red flag to me was PFAS berm next to residential houses. Now I know they all have town water now, I get that, but.
So that's a good question, and we are working with Weston Solutions to encapsulate and cover that soil so that it would not leach into those people's area. But yes, we are including that in the design.
Okay.
And then it would be landscaped. It would not just be a big dirt pile. There'd be topsoil on it and grass.
And I guess like the cost effectiveness of doing all that versus just another option of maybe a wall, for example, is that?
So yes, we could certainly look at that, but the issue still becomes you still have to do something with all that soil. And there's a huge stockpile out there today, and then there are other stockpiles around the airport of soil that can't effectively be shipped off the island.
This alternative is much more cost effective than the wall. Again, it's been deemed eligible. Rich was very successful in getting FAA to agree to that, which walls are not eligible for funding.
All right, again, I guess the encapsulation thing is seems like it's going to be pretty expensive to do right, but I'll have to wait to see what you come up with. Thanks.
Yep.
Any other commissioner comments or questions? I have a few. This is the first I've heard of using it for PFAS soil, so I definitely have some concerns there, somewhat along the same lines as Mr. Marks. I'll definitely, I could see neighbors to the airport along there having concerns with stockpiling that. So how exactly you plan to have a liner and prevent that from happening, I think will be very important. I'm also concerned, that was the first that I've heard, that it sort of would just be built as you have soil available. We've spent many years on this, the ramp expansion and the permitting and the berms, and it was a funded, it was going to get built. And to now hear that it's at, what if you only have the material for 400 feet? Where does that leave us? I don't, I think we're going to have a better plan than that. And we had funding that was approved last year for this project. So certainly appreciate and hope that we can, proceed with it as a federally funded and not have it locally funded, but not if it's only going to happen at a portion of it, because we don't know how much soil we have and when that might happen. Now, maybe that's moot point. Maybe you can do calculations and show sort of how much you have and how much you anticipate. And in fact, it's not a problem, but I definitely would want to know, your predictions of or projections of volume and timing to be able to get that done. In terms of the ramp, I was a little unclear to me on, I think the management plan is, is great. I really see how much work that you've put into that and appreciate it, but it's not quite clear. Is this for the management plan going to be applied to the entire existing ramp and expansion, or is it only to the expanded area?
The presentation was strictly for that expanded area, but we could maybe take some of those concepts and try to apply it to the existing ramp. I never even really thought of that. It's a good thought.
We can look at whatever we can, but if you start to implement some of those, you're just gonna totally restrict our operation. I mean, to try to think we're gonna be able to tow in, tow out all aircraft on a busy weekend is not realistic. But
Understood.
certainly there are some benefits that we could look at, yeah.
So that was my understanding, that we were looking at an overall, and maybe it is that in this plan, we're doing a major multi-million dollar expansion project here, and that this was the chance to really look at the overall ramp operations. I'm fully sympathetic and understand that a hot period on the existing ramp, some things just won't work, but you also have situations like, say, right now, right? Why wouldn't that same management plan apply to the entire ramp, right? If there was a single or one or two or aircraft there. And a lot of the presentation, what I hear consistently through it is about noise, but I really think that another focus here in inclusion needs to be emissions, right? They're hand in hand, and from an environmental perspective, the ramp management and operation is going to be related to the impact that we're having environmentally on our community in terms of in our environment in terms of emissions, and that reduction of emissions is very much a goal that I have and hope for the airport. It's not just noise, but that if they're to be sort of a responsible steward of our environment and our island and our neighbors in the airport, that managing this ramp in a way that makes us good stewards by setting expectations that are reasonable, understanding operational restrictions, understanding the nature of what it is that we're dealing with, but where you can make improvements and have some accountability and have something that I think helps the operations staff be able to rely on when you're trying to tell somebody, look, this is how we have to, we want to operate here, because we want to it's not just what's most convenient for a single operator, if you will. So I think a focus on emissions should also be wrapped into this final document prior to it being adopted, if you will, officially, where you can in there. I think it will make it a stronger document when you use it for showing perhaps, or helping to promote compliance. I mean, that's really, I think, what we're there's not so much of it. There's where's the balance between enforcement and just trying to promote compliance with a policy, and being able to explain to the individuals that you're trying to communicate with that these are the reasons and the basis. So I would like to see, to the extent possible, a little more emphasis that there's a reduction of emissions through doing this. The lights, I think we need some more information on that. I'm glad that you are, looking at it, but obviously I know Mr. Lasden and I and Mr. Carver have had discussions for quite some time now with respect to, and that the commission did adopt the policy, that it would we would comply to the maximum feasible extent with the dark sky policies. But as we're getting closer and closer to design phase and stages and direction on this, I think that it's really important that we look at the lighting management plan, the types of lights that we select. And then probably, and you mentioned just in terms of the festival weekends, I didn't see Wine Festival on there, but I think that's might be something you want to add to the list. I think that's also, become a pretty busy weekend. And you mentioned Daffodil as maybe almost like Wine Festa in between, and perhaps looking at it from a perspective of just the expansion, you're not as concerned. But if we're looking at listing sort of, I think the weekends that you're seeing, a lot more than average activity on the overall ramp, that's just something to maybe consider having on the list. And then finally, my greatest concern is with respect to position number 1, which were discussions that we had when I first saw a couple of years ago, this layout. And the understanding and the response was that it wouldn't be a power in, power out position. And it would, especially when we saw that it was going to be for, potentially an A220. And speaking of Jet Blast, your Jet Blast on a power out from that position is directly against the fence. There's no berm there. There's no, I think that single operation could have, and to hear you say, sort of your quick turn and burn, that concerns me there. I think I would like to see us revisit that one, position, and operationally from there. I think that I'm not sure where you might be able to move that to or how you look at it, but I definitely think that could have a pretty big impact. If you're relying especially on that for like your position of where you would, put the sort of your live parking on a regular basis, and it's, get powering out right there. I think you're going to have a lot of impact on the community from that position. So those are my thoughts as we work on this. And thanks again.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So what's depicted here is just the expansion, is that right? Not the existing.
On the presentation was just the expansion of the Southwest ramp.
Okay, and then, but on the markings part, where you're showing how, different markings at all the parking thing, that looks like that's existing because it says terminal.
That was just a screenshot from an FAA advisory circular that I took as basically a concept of what we could do as far as trying to identify different types of gate numbers and or markings on the ramp where we could tow airplanes to.
Okay.
That's not what a ramp down there would not be that big. That's just more of a visual sense.
Right. Oh, okay. Get that. And so then how does that change what's existing now? I mean, do we keep that the same?
What's existing now, we lack, basically we're planes are coming in, power into their parking spots. They are somewhat marked. We don't have any gate identification or parking numbers. We're utilizing just yellow T's out there right now. The concept behind the expansion and possibly utilizing, a number system or, an ABCD type of system is basically to try to manage and take a little bit of better control of the Gulfstream that's out there. Is going to leave it at 2:00, and then he's at spot number 5. We can try to coordinate that a little bit better between line service and the FBO as far as the services, and get the plane towed where it needs to go and ready for takeoff in a timely manner.
Okay, so does that change the use of the existing? Is that what you're saying?
Possibly, yes. What I had on there as far as the combined operations, I do feel like we would be able to relieve some of the pressure and constraints on the existing ramp. Well, we have a lot of long-term or static planes that come in for the weekend that we tow. And we put them behind what we call the big boy row, which is our existing ramp. When, you know, basically it's next to the grass that's by taxiway Foxtrot. I envision us actually possibly moving those out into, well, you know, like we take the half of the, you know, ramp expansion, making that cold aircraft or, you know, static storage, and we can utilize the other half as hot or warm type of operation. So I feel like it would relieve some of the pressure and congestion off of the main ramp, so we can operate a little bit more smoothly. I don't know if that answers the question or
Yeah.
not.
Yes, thank you, thank you. And I really appreciate all the visuals. I like, there's good.
I like photos.
Ms. Topham? You're muted.
There's another question. When you were talking about the jet glass, I remember that I asked my granddaughter, who worked for the FAA and designed airfields. She mentioned something about that, and I think Mr. Rafter knows. I can't remember the name of the piece of equipment. I think it probably was fairly expensive and at that time, but if we're going to worry, which way I think we should, I'd be worrying about our neighbors and all, and if it was a way to deaden the sound or make it better, I don't know. Could you remember that, Mr. Rafter, please?
Yeah, I recall a number of years ago, we were looking at a noise wall all along there, but there was cost implications, there were aesthetic values, a number of things that it was extremely cost prohibitive. And in fact, the berm was, again, our own money at a couple million right now. We're lucky to get it eligible under FAA funding, so.
Thank you.
So I just put on the screen, you know, the area of concern, you know, which is a power out right here. And in this position, you're very close to the road here, and you're going to have, you know, very large, the largest private and, you know, aircraft. And now you're looking at even a commercial carrier, you know, within less than 100 feet of the road at, you know, full power, to, you know, full power, but significant power to come through this turn and then head out right here. Maybe an option is a portion of a wall like I just drew here, or something, you know, if this has to happen operationally, right? Trying to work through, you know, I believe when we went through the environmental, that the discussion was that this would be a tow in, tow out, and not a power out when we first saw it. I mean, I have to dig through a lot of meetings, but I certainly raised that concern, and, you know, that was, you know, not going to happen in that way. It was the understanding. And to now have it really be described in a management plan as this position is exactly that, I think is a big mistake. And I think that if we're going to do it that way, we would responsibly need to look at a piece of mitigation for, you know, whether this is a one section of a wall. I know that it's difficult to extend the berm, as we discussed there, because you need the width for the slope, you know, and that sort of thing. But I don't think that it would be fair or appropriate to, you know, to have this operate in this manner. I'm just wondering, we can discuss it further, but I have real concerns about this right here. And you look at, you know, this airplane, and I don't need to put up pictures of it, but I think everyone here knows what we're talking about. You know, you're talking about these are globals right here, and this is even bigger than that at an Airbus under power with the engines going right there. I think is not right. So, Mr. Lasden, any thoughts on that,
We could certainly look into a glass wall.
or something? I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, we can model something to show that.
commissioners, any thoughts or anything else? Ms. Tom?
I unmuted. I think I'll call my granddaughter and find out what that piece of equipment was and how much it would be cost, because she said it was a great thing to have. So but that's a couple of years ago or a year and a half ago.
Yeah,
So
please.
just for information.
Thank you. And then in terms of the cameras and the monitoring, you know, you mentioned one camera looking back towards the ramp, but I think that's that's a really great idea, you know, coming out of the plan is, again, anything that helps. You know, and if we need a few more to go along the existing ramp, and even I think that this is the time for us to, if we need a little bit of a project, I would like to hear and know that we're sort of visiting, as the commission revisiting this whole thing to help support, you know, managed operations in an efficient and safe manner of the overall ramp. So I understand there's sort of two projects here. There's our funded project related to the expansion, but do you have a bit of a wish list, if you will, or suggestions that we can then look at, you know, what might help to tweak or improve the ability to, you know, your ability, boots on the ground, managing, you know, what you have. I would certainly be, you know, supportive and interested in that. No, thank you. Anything else, anything else further on this? So we'll bring this back, I assume at some point here in the near future for maybe some answers to some of the questions and any refinements.
Mr. Chair, may I add a brief clarification?
Yes, please do.
All right, thank you. Regarding the comments on PFAS, I believe the statement was made for PFAS waste storage. I think that was an error. We're talking about storing soil there, and unfortunately, soil on the airport contains PFAS. Soil on the island contains PFAS. Mass DEP calls it the haze. When we look across the airport at the project soils we've sampled and the non-project soils we've sampled, it's all at a detectable level to ranges between the S1 and the S3 standards. And all of this soil is currently not contained. There's no requirement for it to be contained. So it is leaching PFAS into the groundwater. And we've mediated that through providing a water line, but an encapsulated berm would be an improvement to the current situation. Mass DEP's opinion on this is they have a policy that they call the anti-degradation clause. They want to see the airport store soil long-term in an area that's already the most degraded. Their opinion and the results of that so far is that that area off of the end of the existing south ramp of the taxiway Juliet is the appropriate place for the airports to commission long-term storage of soil, especially at the S3, the S1 to the S3 levels, because it's already an impaired area. So I think that's important context, that encapsulation via noise berm is what DEP may want in this situation, and it's likely an improvement from the current situation with those stockpiles.
Thanks for the clarification. Anybody else, anything further on this for now? Okay, thank you. And thank you for the presentation. It's very informative. I'm just going to go back to the agenda. Pending matters, Mr. Rafter or Mr. Carter?
The home rule petition, there's been some communications lately, and our town clerk has been very helpful in sending a raised sealed document to the House Committee on Bills, identifying the requested language change was approved by the select board. So we greatly appreciate her help, and it's indicative that there's some movement on this home rule petition. So we're hopeful that that can finally come to an end eventually. And on PFAS, I'll turn it back to Noah for an update on the PFAS.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Rafter. Thank you, Mr. Chair. For my PFAS report, we have an activity update table in your packet. We are at 540 samples taken from 80 individual wells. Regarding our current task orders, for task order PN11 Amendment 2, transducers were previously downloaded in August, and we will provide a separate update to the Airport Commission when that data is available. Downgrading property status and a potentially productive aquifer exclusion. That work is ongoing. We're expecting draft documents for internal review in February. Regarding Amendment 3, the latest round of site-wide soil and groundwater sampling was completed in November. Monitoring well sampling was completed this week. All that data will be included in the next IRA status reports. And that status report is due to Mass DEP on February 28th. And we are expecting to review a draft document for internal review in mid-February. Regarding the GAC system, this is the filter system that treats stormwater coming out of the fuel farm. The media replacement is complete and we're closing that out. Thank you for your support at the last commission meeting. I have 3 updates for you regarding public communication, but it's also a project involvement update. It's been off our agenda for a while, or off my report for a while, but for 3 and 5 Evergreen, we haven't reviewed that address in a while, but you may recall we had a homeowner who was in the process of selling the property, desired to complete their own connections on an expedited basis and bill the airport back for that work. The homework is now closing out that work and the accounting, and we're working with them on completing that paperwork process, making sure everything has been recorded and accounted for correctly, and I'll track that until it's complete. I made contact with a resident on Novadear Way whose bottled water had been stopped. I was able to address his immediate concerns, continue his water for an additional 30 days for the commission's policy, and open a positive and constructive dialogue. So I'm grateful to the resident for that opportunity. And then regarding a different address on Evergreen Way, I reported last month that we were reaching out to a resident whose well had been confirmed through a second test to require connection to the water main. However, this resident has been vocal that they do not want this connection, and they cited a number of concerns, including that we don't speak to them again. However, obviously that's not a realistic outcome for us. We have a responsibility under the MCP, and we're working on reaching back very carefully, courteously, and considered to see if we can address this resident's concerns and move forward collaboratively, and we'll continue to track that as well. And then I have 2 miscellaneous items for you. Airport Gas has completed their stormwater improvements. That installation is complete. We're anticipating as-built will be provided by the tenant through our alteration application within the next 2 weeks. And we'll share those with our project stakeholders. And then regarding Mass DEP project management, on November 29th, I had a site tour with Mass DEP staff at the request. I consider it a friendly orientation meeting for new staff that have been assigned to our project. And then my personal anecdote is they're very impressed with our work on the fuel farm and the fuel farm fire suppression system. That concludes my report. Be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Carver. Does anybody have any questions around the PFAS? Please keep us posted. That'll move us on to the next item on the agenda, which is the rates and charges public hearing that's proposed to be scheduled for January 10th. And we have a general overview. Mr. Rafter is.
Yeah, just before I turn it over to Noah for the overview, I want to remind the commission again that due to the Department of Revenue rules, we can't budget for any anticipated revenues until it's realized. So we're trying to get ahead of this, but we won't be able to budget it until we actually realize it. So we'll see the money come in before we can actually budget. With that, I'll turn it over to Noah for a brief overview of what we're looking at for the increases.
Thank you, Tom. And again, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to share my presentation. It's also in the packet. It looks like a lot of slides, but I'll be going through them fairly quickly. Is everyone viewing my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so for backgrounds, in the packet, I have our current marked up rates and charges documents that cites the changes we'll make with comments. I'm not going to rely on that document. I'm happy to answer questions on it. However, I'll rely on the presentation. The purpose of this presentation is to solicit your strategic feedback ahead of next month's rates and charges hearing. Brief you on the items we're changing, so you have an opportunity to see it beforehand and advise us if any of our approaches don't fit with your philosophical approach to the airport's implementation of rates and charges. Just as a brief reminder, we're an airport that sets rates by ordinance through our public hearing process. This public hearing will take place on January 10th, 2023. With your consent for the public hearing, we will then reach out immediately to put the appropriate ads in the paper and notify our tenants, especially our airlines. This is a productive time for schedule as we begin the process of reviewing and distributing our airline agreements this spring. Following the rates and charges hearings, we can provide them an updated pro forma for their fees that would be due. We have a simple approach this year. We've had complicated approaches in years past. We've chosen a 5% across the board increase to landing, ramp, and hangar fees. Then for addition by subtractions, we're not proposing changes to methods or to our philosophy, and we're maintaining fee waivers for year-round operation. Regarding our landing fee and our 5% increase to our signatory terminal user class, which is currently Cape Air, I've highlighted the changes. You can see that there are two changes highlighted. When you implement a multiple rate formula, we have a fixed and a variable cost. We are increasing our fixed cost, our multiplier, by 5% to $3.34. But we're also increasing the amount we discount to our signatories. So a Cessna 402 under the previous rate charge would pay $15.14. Under the proposed rate charge, it only escalates to $15.20. This is a way we can continue to increase the same basis across our landing fee to all users, yet call out our signatory providers for reduced treatments in exchange for the service they provide us year-round. This format of the graph will repeat throughout my presentation. I'll just take a minute to explain it here, and I'll pick up the pace as we move through. We have good records of landing fees assessed going back to 1999. That is our black line. This is how we have instituted rates over time for our signatory carriers for 402. I'm also visualizing that rate as it would have been subject to a CPI, Consumer Price Index increase. I'm not suggesting we benchmark to CPI. I'm not saying whether being above or below a CPI rate is good or bad. I just think that there's a benefit to looking at the CPI and how it relates to categories of fees that we've implemented historically. So it's just a basis for comparison across our fees. For our non-signatory terminal users, JetBlue, American, Delta, United, again, I've highlighted the current fee rate and the escalation, $3.18 to $3.34. In E190 will increase from $353 to almost $371. And again, you can see a little bit different historical rate approach, and we continue to mimic that in regards to CPI, more or less keep pace with CPI. For FBO users, small GA under 6,000 pounds, example, a Cessna 172, 5% increases from $5 per landing to $5.25 per landing. For FBO users with the takeoff weight greater than 6,000 pounds, I'm going to use the basing example of a Gulfstream 450. We are increasing, I'm proposing an increase of two items. Again, our $3.18 to $3.34. And then we have a fixed fee that we use to recoup the human resources, the staffing angle, providing marshaling services, driving buses, that sort of thing. $33 is a fixed fee, $40 for a fixed fee. This first graph shows the Cessna 172 example, with the caution that from 1999 to 2012, the airport did introduce different iterations of ramp fee waivers and fuel waivers that skew the relative value of just the landing fee. So again, the relative value of the landing fee has declined over time, but at the same time, there are different discount waivers in place. It's not a straight apples to apples comparison. And then when we look at the Gulfstream 450 example, you can see that the airport has traditionally kept fee rate increases more or less in line with CPI. For our ramp fee categories, we're proposing an across the board 5% increase to ramp fees to remain overnight fees. And I just want to remind the commission, I think it was last year or it was 2021, we established a ramp phase-in period when we put our large air carriers on the same ramp fee schedule as general aviation. For some carriers, this could have resulted in an overnight quadrupling of their ramp fees. So similar to our non-aeronautical land use policy, we established a metric to phase this in over 5 years. So we will have to update the numbers in that phase-in period. For hangar and tie down fees, we're proposing the same 5% increase across the board for our existing categories. It's a minor revenue component, but from a philosophical standpoint, it's a consistency of increase across user categories that we are trying to implement. And then we are also considering policy items. Right now, in the common hangar, we will receive notice from a common hangar tenant that they wish to use their aircraft, and we will send a staff person over to move the 2 aircraft out of the front, bring that tenant's aircraft out, put the other 2 back in. This takes a lot of time, and in some cases it can increase our exposure to hangar wrench. So we want to look at how we approach that and if that's the best use of our time. But again, that's separate from a rates policy, but I did want to note it. And as you can see, the common hangar fee has not changed in quite a significant amount of time. And then we have a number of miscellaneous fee increases. We have a law enforcement officer service reimbursement formula that we're calling out. It's based off of a 20% to 20, an 80-20 split of fixed to variable costs. We define the metric. It's based off of passenger enplanements. 20% of the costs are shared equally among the airlines. The remaining 80% are variable based on that airline share of enplanements. So if you put more passengers through the airport, you bear a higher portion of those costs. It's a very common reimbursement mechanism in airports. We're increasing penalties for operating without agreements. The cost of an agreement is going up, at least for most carriers, significantly. We want to make sure just that the penalty, which we've never had to enforce, but if a carrier in the future would opt not to pull and sign and execute an agreement with us in time, we just want to make sure that this penalty still has force compared to the rates that they would pay. I expect this one to be of interest to a number of users in our transient community, but we currently waive our GA ramp fee for small GA aircraft when they purchase 10 gallons of fuel. In my opinion, it takes a lot of time to fuel an aircraft with only 10 gallons of fuel. It takes just about the same amount of time it takes to fuel an aircraft with 100 gallons of fuel. I don't think this is the best use of our time, so I would propose ending that fee waiver. We've had the APU overuse fee to TBD on the books for a number of years. I'm proposing removing that item. I'm proposing an increase to GPU, the preheater, and the freight fees. We wish to add new fee categories for ice and dishwashing. And then we wanted to remove redundant and outdated language, such as third-party aeronautical services and the TNC fee pending approval now that that has been approved by the State House. Again, with all things being equal between fiscal year 22 actual and fiscal year 24 estimated, all of the reporting numbers for 23 are not in yet. That's why I'm using these two categories. I forecasted our anticipated increase across categories. You can see where the large changes are. We expect a very small increase for Cape Air. We expect a larger increase for our commercial air carriers. The largest increase of $145,000 in additional revenue would hit to landing fees for larger transient FBO users, as well as for ramp fees for general aviation users. The rest of the fee breakout is shown. We're anticipating around $400,000, again, conservatively, using a fiscal year 22 actual basis as far as revenue we would realize in fiscal year 24. And again, as Tom mentioned, this isn't budgeted revenue for fiscal year 24 because it's not realized yet. That was a quick walkthrough. Happy to take any questions on this or the Word documents in the packet.
Thank you. No, I'm sure we'll be having, this is a precursor to the public hearing. We'll go through this again, though. I think if commissioners have any questions or comments at this point, we really should get them on the table and discuss them so that the final document that's published for the public hearing is refined, if you will. Does anybody have any questions or concerns about any of the changes that were proposed by Mr. Carberg?
I just have one, Arthur.
Yeah, go ahead. I can only see part of the screen, but go ahead.
Yeah, just the non-waiving of fees for buying fuel. It's a pretty standard thing to do no matter where you go as a private pilot. Whether you fly to White Plains, New York, or you fly to Teterboro, and then Nantucket. Now we want to do away with that. It's kind of I don't know. I think that's the GA guys are usually the guys that a lot of them are learning how to fly, or they're new pilots, or just maybe don't have a lot of money to be flying, but it's good to get them out there, and maybe they're growing into being a commercial pilot or something like that. I just feel like that's a nice place to have a little give back. We don't have to get every nickel out of everybody. So.
Thank you, Mr. Marks. I had a question for you on that. So the other airports that you have experience with, is the volume of fuel consistent with the 10 gallons? It's all over the place. I mean, typically, what might maybe there's a tweak to be made?
Yeah, I think if you wanted to, like to Mr. Carberg's point, 10 gallons isn't enough, make it 20 gallons, right? I mean, I think if you could do that, or, I mean, the problem is if you're flying a 150, right, you may not be able to take 20 gallons of fuel. Haven't flown a lot, so that might be an issue too. So, but yes, you could maybe make the fuel higher and have an exception for a plane that can't hold much fuel. I don't know. It's just one of those things. It's a perk that you get when you contribute to that airport. They give something back to you as a way to look at it, right? So.
As I recall, I thought that we did that to encourage GA.
Right.
Yeah. What are the revenue implications? Did I see that? I don't know. I saw the increases, but if it's a very small number and it's a sort of a positive community facing effort, maybe like you say, maybe we increase how many gallons to some extent, some reasonable amount, or maybe we need to do a little research, but I'm not sure I want to get rid of it either.
could answer. I appreciate the comments. I think those are very helpful comments. The revenue, either way, whether it's changing it to 20 gallons or removing it altogether, it's negligible either way.
So it's more of an effort on the staff, and how do we, is it how burdensome, I guess, is it if it really is a goodwill to the aviation community? Yeah.
For the public hearing, I can look further into that and have some actual numbers on number of discounts given, number of transactions.
Yeah, I will just say that when I fly a lot and you go look at comments and stuff like that, that's one of the things that a lot of people make a comment about. Is that, oh, they want to feed me to death. And there's certain FBOs that I won't go to anymore because they do that. They feed you to death, and then so you don't go there anymore. You go find some other place to go or a different FBO. We only have one, so we're kind of stuck there. But not that you're unfair. I don't mean like that. I just mean we don't have any other options. So yeah.
Thank you.
Any other comments on the changes? I had one on the GPU use fee, and I see that you're projecting to bring in a fair amount of income from that. At the same time, I believe we were trying to encourage GPU use, and so where is that balance? Is there perhaps a certain amount of time that you don't charge for, and then you charge, if someone wants, sort of tying the thing up and it's excessive use? Or is it similar to, the fuel, that it's all your labor and sort of, I don't want to use the word effort, goes into, sort of the staging and getting it set up, and then it doesn't really matter. But I wonder, all along we've talked about that, as we're trying to promote, limited APU use, that, having the GPUs as an option was sort of a worthwhile benefit. So I don't know that charging for them is going to help promote that objective.
And I think that's a very good observation. There are two competing considerations. The major cost recovery angle is the staff time to drive a tug to a GPU, move it to aircraft. They are used pretty regularly. The ongoing maintenance and fuel costs are a minor consideration. That's the operational angle. The philosophical angle is, rates and charges methodology is there to support the commission's philosophical goal for using the airports. It would be equally as valid to take the approach that rates and charges should be set for this item very low to encourage their use. There isn't necessarily a right or a wrong answer. It could be at either end, or we could do some more research and propose some ranges in the middle.
All right, thank you. That was just the one thing that I had. I mean, I'm not sure where to really go on that. I know we've talked about it. So you're looking to go on those from 15 to 50. And before, the 15's even new, right? Before that, it was free up until, I thought, the last race in charges. And even that, I thought that it was waived. I don't even remember it going to the 15, to be honest with you. But now we're going to 50 with just, I think 2 or 3 years ago, it was actually free. And maybe that's, I guess I would ask, operationally, in your experience, and maybe this is to you as well, Preston, if not to put you on the spot, you don't have to, do you think the fee actually would discourage the use, or is it if people just want them, they want them and they're going to ask for them, it's the right thing to do? And I guess I would just sort of wonder about that.
Yeah, when I was making that presentation, that was one of my first thoughts. If we're going to try to limit a lot of the APU usage and encourage the GPUs, and we're gonna still charge them, yeah, could we have a disgruntled pilot or something like that? So yeah, there's that side of it as well, for sure. Something to think about.
I would be supportive of not changing that one. That's just my position, but it's again, gonna be up to sort of everybody as we're looking at the ramp management. You know, trying to promote that use.
Also, maybe, I don't use one or anything, so I don't know what they cost other places. Maybe just a quick look around someplace to see what people are getting for them. If
Yeah.
it's a free thing or not, I'm not sure. Just maybe that's a quick, it's pretty quick to find out.
Ice is a deal at $5 a bag. It's $6 at the gas station.
It's
Anyway.
free today here.
Yeah, no, I can't have free ice anymore. Okay, thank you. Anybody else, anything further? Okay, we'll move on to, and thank you very much for that. We'll look forward to the public hearing. Finance, Mr. Rafter, the draft operating budget.
Yes, in your packet is the draft operating budget. And again, Jamie's done a great job of preparing that and putting in some very detailed notes. We met this morning with the town finance director and his staff and went through that, addressed any questions they had. I'll just give you a quick overview, and then if you have any questions, either myself or Jamie could probably address them. The revenue budget increased about $850,000 over last year, but still less than the actual for FY22 by about 3.7 million. The FY22, though, was considered a bit of an anomaly as we had some pent-up demand associated with the pandemic. Expenses also increased by about $850,000, primarily driven by the price of fuel, but also utility increases as well as overall cost of goods. We transfer the normal $400,000 again this year, and you may recall in FY22 we only transferred $250,000 out of the PFCs. That was again associated with the traffic due to the pandemic. So again, Jamie's done a great job. She's prepared a balanced budget. Unfortunately, the town is not expecting the retained earnings to be certified from DOR until January. However, our other funds are performing very well, and as intended, the fuel revolver FY projected end fund balance is 4.8 million. We're going to be requesting a cap of 6.9 million for the fuel based on best information and speculation of what may happen with the price of fuel. And if anybody has any better science to tell us what the price of fuel is going to be over the next year, let us know. But again, if we need to, we can request an increase. And Jamie has developed a methodology to put some framework around establishing the base as well as a review of it when towards the end of the year when we need to see if we have to get an increase. And just a reminder, to increase the fuel revolver cap requires approval from FinCom and the select board. Stabilization fund has done well, and it's minimizes any significant impact on our operating budget when a long-time employee retires. We have one coming up in March, so that'll be very helpful during that. Our PSC reserve fund has been holding around 1.5 to 1.9 million. And we continue to apply the $400,000 each year to the operating budget. On the detail sheets, again, Jamie has provided a lot of detail in the comments section there. And on personnel, we've held the positions of assistant airport manager and environmental coordinator. The environmental coordinator is basically we're reinstating one that was previously in there. Positions of administrative assistant and receptionist, we're in the process of filling, and they should be starting January 3rd. We still continue to have 2 openings in maintenance, and we're requesting an increase for seasonal pay of $2 an hour in an effort to be more competitive. With that, I'll be glad to try to answer any questions regarding the budget. And I will re-emphasize what I tell staff: a budget is a tool We also pay very close attention to our actual, because we don't want to get into a situation where we may not have the actual income, but just because it's budgeted, we're allowed to expend it.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions? Looks good. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jim. Want to move on to the manager's report?
Yes, please.
Okay, on the projects master plan update, the inventory is underway. There have been several stakeholder meetings held. There's a technical advisory committee going to be scheduled for January. Taxiway Echo working to schedule some final drainage improvements with Lawrence Lynch. The housing was discussed with both Select Board and Capcom over the past couple of weeks. Just recently presented again to Capital Committee. We identified that we reduced it to a dorm style facility only, reducing the costs. It appears that there may be a possible favorable recommendation from Capcom with conditions to coordinate with planning and HDC. I don't know if we'll get into that in a little bit if anybody has questions or comments. Taxiway Golf work is scheduled to begin in March or April. We're finalizing a reimbursable agreement with the FAA Tech Ops. Terminal optimization, we went through earlier. Hangar development, Hagedorn Aviation is working on their finishes and is due to be completed in about 6 weeks. The HVAC project is wrapping up, and we're going to be looking into a lightning arresting project to help protect some of our different circuits that we have. The RFPs, the OPM on housing and terminal, we hope to have for next meeting the OPM scope and fee for the housing project. RFP for Bunker Road 60 and 66 available. Bids are due in on January 11th. And we're working internally on the RFQ for planning and engineering. It's been sent down to the town procurement officer. On the operations side of the house, as you all know, we had a presidential visit over Thanksgiving, and our staff did a tremendous job on handling that. Special thanks to Preston and Skylar for their efforts. I think it was very well done. Our holiday fuel sales during Thanksgiving, the number of fuel gallons sold were the highest since 2018, with total sales, including landing ramp and other catering fees, the highest also since 2018. And again, a lot of that is driven by the cost of fuel for the sales, but the gallons are also up pretty high. I'm sure we've all heard about the tragic event on Bunker Road. Last Thursday, Commissioner Marks alerted us to the fact of the event, and we made arrangements to provide an access across the airport. We had to bring in some extra staff, and I want to just thank the staff for their assistance, and our prayers go out to those involved in the accident, especially the families involved. So statistics summary for October, ops were up, operations were down about 18.5%, and employments were up about 11.6%. GA operations was down 25%. It was a very strong October for commercial passengers. The details are in your packet for all the markets. On the personnel report, Blaine Buckley, longtime operations supervisor here, has announced his plan to retire after 22 years of service. We wish him well, but he's planning to retire, I believe, in March. And it's going to be a big role to fill there. So he's been a champion for our software that we use for VOCI, the operations and maintenance, and served admirably in this. So we wish him well, and we've already started the process to seek replacement. And I'm also pleased to announce that Boyana Stoikova Nelson, you all know, has been selected as our office manager. We should be announcing shortly her replacement as well as the receptionist. And on a final note, this is my last meeting as the airport manager, and I want to thank all of you for your support and help through the years. Got an incredible airport, amazing staff, and I'm sure Noah will do very well. Wish him luck, and I'll be around to help support him in my new role. So thank you all for everything.
Thanks, Tom. I have to say that hadn't actually even clicked with me until you just mentioned it. Wow. It's I certainly express my thanks publicly to you for all of your service and help to this community and the airport for the last decade. It's been a pleasure working with you.
Thank you.
Been a great ride, Tom.
Yeah, I have to echo Arthur's comments. Thank you very much.
And with that, did anybody have any questions on Mr. Rafter's report? I would just expand briefly. He was quite generous, I think, in the Capcom process. I think that I would also tip my hat to Mr. Carberg and his presentation to the select board, which was a joint meeting with the finance committee. And I thought it was very well done. And I thought that it really helped to portray the airport in a good position in terms of looking to, be coordinated with other towns boards and express that, the goal, of the commission is also, when it comes to housing, is aligned with the stated goals of the select board. We're all in this together, and I thought that went very well. There were a lot of questions at the Capcom level, and we did our best, I think, collectively to address those. And I think we've been at this for years. We've continued it. Some past years as a result of some comments that they've had, but I think it really is time, that this project goes forward. And I anticipate that, there'll be some need for representation on these matters at upcoming finance committee meetings, and then ultimately town meeting. So thanks again. Anybody else, anything further on the manager's report? Any commissioners' comments?
I just have one comment. I just wanted to, again, thank Tom and Noah for their assistance the day of the accident, because it was amazing how quickly they responded when I asked for some help out here to get people in and out of here that were trapped in Bunker Road. So I just wanted to say thanks again. It was an amazing response, and very well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Anything further? Hearing not, I would entertain a motion to go into executive session per general law, chapter 38, section 21A, to review the executive session minutes enumerated on the agenda for review and possible release, and to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, when the chair has determined that an open session may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the airport commission, not to return to open session. Is there such a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Ms. Topham, how do you vote? Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Viscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Marks?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you all very much.